All right, guys, gold and silver prices are really holding their own. Over the past couple of days, we've been seeing gold and silver prices in a bit of a trading range, but that trading range is pointing somewhat upwards. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, we can take a look at the price action here in a better way for gold. Now, take a look. The lowest that we've been at recently was around the high 1670s. In recent days, since we've been in this trading range, we have not tested that lower bound, but the upper bound, see this huge red candlestick here, that points towards some institutional distribution there, some selling. When we tested that, of course, we dropped back down. We didn't scream past it. But as we dropped, I was eyeing whether or not we'd be heading back down to this lower bound, and we didn't, which is good. So our troughs did not edge lower below our latest lower bound, which is a good sign. Now, we haven't yet tested the upper bound again, but I'm glad to see that this lower bound hasn't, or this lower bound in the high 1670s hasn't been retested. So we'll see how things go. We're currently in a trading range, but I expect to see prices to continue to rise. Now, speaking of prices for gold rising, take a look here at what Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had to say about prices. Prices will rise because of stimulus, but that won't last, Janet Yellen says. Now, finally, someone is out here speaking the truth. Instead of all of us who are, living in our mama's basements, looking eerie and creepy with our gold and our silver in our hands, and shaking our fists at the sky, we finally have some truth coming out of Washington. As you can see here, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said she didn't think inflation posed a significant risk now that the Biden administration's relief is signed and on its way to implementation. Now, guys, if you saw my community tab over the weekend, you saw that I have mine pending to get into my account. I checked that it should be getting in on March 17th. So let me know in the comment section if you've gotten your pending from the IRS transaction. Let's continue. Prominent economists, including Larry Summers, have warned in part that the bill could impact financial stability and lead to unprecedented inflationary pressure. Quote, policymaking is about identifying and addressing risks, and the most significant risk we face is a workforce that's scarred by a long period of unemployment, Yellen said on ABC's This Week. Yellen added that prices fell substantially last year when the surged, and that she expects to see them move up again as the economy recovers. Now, I don't know what she's talking about. I can only imagine she's probably talking about the CPI. But all of us who have been in the gold space, silver space, general assets that people desire, we've seen prices rise significantly. That's the reason why the S&P 500, Dow, and others hit huge milestones, breaking records. We saw gold breaking its record. We saw silver edging up even higher. Prices have been rising for commodities, for assets. Home prices have been rising as well. Now, she might be talking about the CPI, which is a basket of goods and services that are indexed. But that's not the best way to take a look at what's happening as far as inflationary pressures, especially when you take in consideration commodities such as aluminum, nickel, copper. These are what businesses have to buy in order to make the products that we get at the end of that. So, of course, prices are going to rise by the end of this year, because after they, get out of the manufacturing stage and then they get into the services sector and into our hands, these end products, those prices were passed all the way down to us. So we are going to see some prices increase. That is true, but you can't act like prices haven't been increasing for businesses at the start of the supply chain. Take a look here. That's a temporary movement in prices, she said. To get a sustained high inflation like we had in the 1970s, I absolutely don't expect that. We've had a very well anchored inflation expectations and a Federal Reserve that's learned about how to manage inflation. So I don't think it's a significant risk. And if it materializes, we'll certainly monitor for it, but we have the tools to address it. Now, she's likely talking about raising rates to try to squash it. But again, inflation is there, it's ever present. Though we haven't had high CPI since the 1970s, on this channel, we've talked about the methodology changing. On this channel, we've also talked about looking for inflation within specific sectors, not just within the CPI as a whole. There are many different things you can do to look for and find inflation. And it doesn't even take a rocket scientist to do this. All you have to do is look at the price of a cheeseburger from 1970 and look at the price of a cheeseburger in 2021, and you will see that prices have been skyrocketing. You can also take a look at localized inflation. If you have ever been to San Francisco, Seattle, New York City, you will see that all those people there who have all of those dollars chasing after fewer goods and so much competition happening because of that, you're going to see prices rising, as opposed to if you go to a place that doesn't have that many people, that doesn't have that much, that doesn't have that many dollars circulating within an economy, you're going to see lower prices, because what helps or what pushes inflation are not just the presence of dollars or too many dollars, but it's the velocity, how many times it changes over within an economy. So that's also something to take in consideration. In addition to this, we saw this happening over the weekend. Biden eyes first major tax hike since 1993 in next economic plan. Now, this is going to be interesting because this will also impact the economy. It'll also impact the S&P 500 as we start to see corporate taxes raise, and some are saying it might raise up into the 28% level. We are going to start seeing earnings being affected by this, because you have to because in order to analyze a company when you're investing, you have to take into consideration the taxes that it pays. So the more money that they don't have in their pockets, the more it impacts their bottom line. So we are going to start to see it impact the S&P 500, and we're going to start to see it impact GDP as well, which is not a good thing when you consider the fact that we have so much debt that we have to pay for. And the only way we can do that is if our GDP continues to rise so we can cover our debt that's already in place. But the only way for us to have GDP rise is if we have businesses who have the ability to do that in the most effective way. But if they are hamstrung and debt continues to rise, as there's another infrastructure bill that's on the table that Biden wants to put in place and pay for with taxes, we're going to have a hard time paying off all of that debt. So no wonder why people are already eyeing China will definitely overtake the U.S. as far as GDP is concerned in this decade. Some have thought, or some have proposed it'll happen in 2028. Some have said, hey, it'll happen in 2024. But we know it's going to happen this decade, and we know that something like this, it may not have a major effect, but it will have some effect, especially if China doesn't impose something similar onto its business sector as well. But as far as gold and silver prices and prices in general, we will start to see prices increase by the end of this year. I expect the dollar to continue to drop. I expect gold prices to continue to rise. When it comes to silver as well, let's take a look here. Same thing. As I mentioned before, we are in a trading range. But as you see here, the recent low that we had with silver did not cross below our most significant recent low. So we are starting to see somewhat of good positive direction when it comes to the metals. But guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks again for watching. Oh, by the way, I should mention, if you are astute and you've been watching this channel for a while, you may realize that my voice probably sounds different today as opposed to the last couple of days. The reason why is because I had been traveling for the last couple of weeks, seeing family and so on. But now I'm back at my desk and I have my normal mic, my Shure SM7B, and I have all of my equipment here. So videos will be made much easier. So guys, thanks again for watching. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe if you're new. It's Black Bullion for goldandsilvertoday.com.